Thanks so much for joining and coming back to visit Black Minds Matter and our Black Owned School tour. We've been doing these Black Owned Schools tours for almost a year now, and everyone knows that's listened and seen it. It's always such a pleasure to hear all of the different types of schools and the innovative approaches to education and learning. And for this episode, we are visiting T.H.R.I.V.E Academy in Georgia. So I have with me Principal Mo. Thanks so much for being on. Her swag is terrific for all of those who are listening on the podcast and can't see her. She just is like swaggerific, which is lame. Your students would probably be like, lame. But thanks so much for being on, and I am so happy to talk to you about your school.
Man, thank you for the invite, and just thank you for the work that you're doing, and just shout out to everyone that's taking the time to listen, even if it's for inspiration to pursue something likewise or something that's going to become legendary, that takes striving and work, but that it's going to become legendary. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing to feature us in what we do every day.
Awesome. Thank you. And so first, start off, talk to me about your background. How did education, come into actualization in your own life?
Gotcha. So my story is quite different than the others I was able to catch when I was researching your organization, all the work you all have done. I'm like, oh, these principals have great stories. So mine is a little different. Let me just preface it with that, right? And so I grew up in a dual military household. Both of my parents were on active duty. And so I grew up moving around, went to 13 different schools before I graduated, pretty much. That's me, the traditional, typical Army brat. And so I attended Howard University with aspirations to be an attorney. In my mind, I was going to be the first African-American Supreme Court Chief Justice, female version, right? And so thank you. I went to Howard to go there. I majored in political science. I double majored in poli-sci and also administration of justice and sociology. And so in my mind, I was going to go on to Howard Law School. I attended Howard University on an Army ROTC scholarship. And so when it came time for me to graduate, I had to request a delay, what's called an educational delay, so that I could pursue my master's degree. And again, I'm thinking that I'm going to get a JD. And God sent me in a different direction. I ended up attending Emory Candler School of Theology, and I got a Master's of Divinity and became an Army chaplain. So I am an Army Reserve chaplain, and I opened a community center in 2011 in downtown Lithonia, Georgia. And I did spiritual counseling, workouts. It was just like holistic health. We collected Christmas toys. We gave them out to the community. We had Thanksgiving meals, full course meals, plated. Anybody, whether you are homeless or you're a public servant or you're in law enforcement and you had to work on Thanksgiving or Christmas, you could come and get a hot meal with us. Everything was decorated. So I was doing just community work, just doing what I felt called to do at the time. And out of that community center as T.H.R.I.V.E Academy was. And so in 2013, to open T.H.R.I.V.E Christian Academy with 2 first grade students. And the first day of school was September 3rd, 2013. And I had 2 first graders. And those 2 first graders have grown to over 220 students, kindergarten through 12th grade. And so it's just been an amazing adventure. And so I would say that I don't want to say I fell into it, but I was called to it out of the need of the community. And there was a need for Black and brown faced babies to be in spaces where their culture didn't have to be explained, where it's already understood. And so that's already been established. So we don't have to work on that. We don't have to negotiate space for what all you bring to the table and the beauty of you and what our community represents. That's already been established. So we we've already done that work. And so we get to continue to work on that and add academics on top of it. And so that's the aspiration, to have a space that cultivates the minds of young people who think different, or as you say, have a different swag, right? Who create their own words, their own languages, who have a language. And it doesn't have to be implied. It's already understood. I guess that's the saying the kids say now: what's understood doesn't have to be said, or something like that, right? Like it's already there. We're already here in our culture. We're already here in our blackness, right? So that doesn't have to be worked on. It just has to be empowered.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so you broke up a little bit. So start back at the military, holistic um community center, to you opening your doors in 2013.
It was quick. There wasn't much in between there. I'm an Army chaplain. I opened a community center in 2011, and 2 years later, I opened Thrive Christian Academy with 2 first grade students. And I started with 2 first grade students in that first school year. There were 2 first grade students, and then I had 2 second grade students. So I finished my first year, our first graduation, 2014. At the end of the year, our award ceremony, I had 2 first graders and 2 second graders. And God put it on my heart to pursue this school that was for lease. And it was like 30,000 square feet, 3 floors, full gym, library, computer lab, everything that I had in my parent handbook that I started when I only had 2 first grade students. And I pursued it. And I remember the owner being like, well, how are you going to pay the rent? You only have 4 kids. And I was just like, I don't know. But God told me to do this. So God's going to figure it out. We'll just rotate classrooms every day. We'll have class in a different classroom every day. And that was my honest answer.
That's
And
awesome.
when we opened that building, we had like 56 kids on the first day of school, and I had a staff of like 14 of us, which is just crazy. And it's just grown since then. And we added high school 5 years ago, had our first graduating class 3 years ago. So this will be our 3rd class of seniors that will graduate this May. And that's just the nuts and bolts of it. I literally was just doing what I felt called to do, what I felt the community needed, and trying to answer that call and be diligent, be faithful to it.
Yeah, I mean, but talk to me about that transition, because those are totally, 2 totally different lanes of work. So did something click in you? Did a light bulb go out? Did you see something? Did you read something? Were you listening to the pastor at church or something to, kind of turn that light bulb up? I'm gonna start cool.
I know what you're looking for to make it make sense, but I don't have it to give. And one thing that you said is really important is that it feels like 2 different lanes, but it's not. I was already doing community work. I was already serving the community. And we come from a people that when they thought of serving the community, clothes, food, they included education. Right? And so that's part of the beauty of your organization, is that your organization forces education back into the conversation. When we talk community, we talk health, we talk access to resources, we talk funding, we talk support, we talk childcare, we talk food, food resources, and paying your bills, and temporary aid, all those things. But we is so, for whatever reason, education doesn't intercede in that conversation. But if I'm in the community and I'm feeding people, and people are coming and they're bringing their children to pick up Christmas toys, it forces the question of, what do these children do for 6 hours out the day, and who are they with, and who's caring for them, because they are part of our community, right? And so it's not, even though I felt how you felt when I first started, I felt like, God, what is this you're calling me to do? Because it's so different. And I realized very quickly that this isn't far off from me being an Army chaplain. Like, every day I care for people. Every day I try to give wisdom. Every day I'm investing in the lives of people, hoping for the greater good, extremely optimistic that one person can make a change. And then I have this amazing team that multiplies that into, well, 31 of us can make even bigger change, right? No matter how many students we see. And so when I started with 2 first grade students, it didn't feel very different from me planning a Christmas toy drive. I had the community in mind.
Yeah.
and I had the desire to supply a need based on what God had shown me.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's beautifully said. And you're exactly right. Like, we have a lot of conversations in society about the empowerment of Black and Brown people, about the empowerment of minorities and
Yeah.
addressing inequalities and making sure that systems are, affirming and not, devaluing
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
people of color. And we have not given that same attention to the education space. So you are exactly right. And to see that and to say, I've been doing this work, this is just a different way of interpreting and
Yeah.
expressing work that I've already been doing is really beautiful. It's really beautiful. And hats off. Tell me what does Thrive stand for? Because it's an acronym. Tell me what Thrive stands for.
It is an acronym. So THRIVE stands for Truth, Humility, Respect, Integrity, Victory, and Excellence. And so we call them the 6 pillars of Thrive. And what we try to do is just make everything route back to one of those 6 pillars, right? And so you didn't do your homework doesn't become a chastisement conversation like you should have did your homework. It becomes a, you know, like it, like where you operating in your best self. If you want to be a person of integrity, a person of character, a person that people can rely on, depend on, what does it mean that you were giving this assignment and you didn't show up to it with it today? Like it was your responsibility. And so that's a totally different conversation, right? Because then I can't, as a child, I can't just offer, oh well, I forgot my book at school. Well, responsibility is responsibility. Right? And you may not need homework 20 years from now to be successful, but you do need to know how to be a responsible person to be successful, right? And so that's what Thrive stands for. And we were very intentional to make sure that anything that we're doing in word or deed routes back to one of those pillars, because at the end of the day, we're saying that that's what it takes to be a good Samaritan. That's what it takes to be a scholar. That's what it takes to be a positive influence, a positive vibration in your community, right? You need those things.
No, that's awesome. And one of my questions for it was going to be, what is your hope for students? And that's ingrained not only in, what's typical in the mission and in the vision of the school, but in the name. So every time the students are walking around, with their patron, their uniform, saying what school they go to, they're
Yeah,
thinking about your 6 pillars of what Thrive is and who
yeah,
they are as an individual. And there's so much to education. Like, we already know teachers are overwhelmed and
yeah, you're
overworked and all this stuff. And it is a lot that goes into education. Teachers
right.
are often their kids' counselors. And if you're at a private school or at a charter school, you're not only their counselor, but you're going to be the ones providing meals and, clothing
Absolutely,
and
absolutely,
family support. You go way, way deeper. And it goes beyond, just the academics. And so
right.
to even notice that is integral to just the success of our beautiful babies.
Absolutely.
So yeah, talk to me a little bit about your babies. Talk to me about how many you're serving now. You said you're moving into high school. Talk to me a little bit about your students and yeah.
Cool. So my babies, my Thrive babies, are just literally like just everyday reminders that we get to write the narrative, right? There's so many entities in the world defining the narrative of African American young men, of African American women, of Black women, of Black men. There's so many narratives defining the Black community and who we are and what we stand for. But at Thrive, like our students literally give us the opportunity every day to put pen to paper through their lives of the beauty and the essence and the greatness of us. And we started out, I started out with 2 1st graders. The end of the year I had 2 1st graders and 2 2nd graders. And long story short, one of my 1st grade parents, I gave them a brag book because I'm tough. I was tough on them the first year. I'm still tough now, but I was tough on them the first year. So I was just pushing them, and anything they could take, I was giving it to them. So I made them a brag book of all these things they had done above their grade level. And one of those things that were included were their standardized tests that they took that year. So I put them up against the top private school students in the nation and had them take this test. And they showed out, needless to say. And so one of the moms posted it on her social media, and the school one of my first graders came from, his former teacher saw it. And so she had a conversation with some other teachers about it. And they just literally showed up on my doorstep one day of my school and knocking. And I was just like, hey, how can I help you? They explained like, hey, we used to teach this student. We saw what he was able to do. We see that you're pushing them. You're allowing the freedom, the liberty. And whoever the teacher is, it seems like they have permission to do what they need to do to get this student to max capacity. There's no potential being left untapped. And I was just like, well, that would be me, because I'm the teacher, principal, bus driver, janitor, all the above, because I'm only one person, And anyway, we had a conversation that day, and they, like 3 of them ended up signing contracts before I even had students for them. But they believed in the vision, and they believed that the need was in the community, and that if we built it, that people would come, right? So then it's like the story of Nehemiah in the Bible, in a sense. And I had teachers way before I had students, right? And when the teachers came, the students came, God sent the students as well. And so that year after the first year, we moved into that building, and we had, we went up to 5th grade that year. So we went from kindergarten 3 up to 5th grade, fully accredited, all those things. And then, 5th grade sounded good. It's like, okay, that gets them old enough to put them in middle school. We give them a good foundation, they'll be fine. And what we found is when our 5th graders left to transition back into public schools, that it was challenging for them. Number one, academically, they were just like, shh, right? And so then the parents were having to go through the method of getting them tested for TAG and all these different acronyms people use for talented and gifted classes. And, and then that was...
I was going to ask if you could go back and define the shh for all of those who are listening. That meant that they were far superior than their
academically. They were running circles around people. So then that was causing an issue, right? Because now they're in class board. So now they're distracted, they're talking, they're getting labeled. And so pretty much the feedback from students that were transitioning out of Thrive was like, we need more. We need to go to middle school at least, Miss Monica, right? So then the following year, we decided to go up to 8th grade. And so we added middle school as 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But we're a grade level ahead. So then the 5th graders who were on 6th grade curriculum, they're now coupled with middle school as well. And so then the same thing happened when our students got to 8th grade. But then I realized that, there's other private school options in the state of Georgia for middle school. So even if we hadn't done it, it's like there's other niches people could have got into. But there aren't a lot of private school, African-American owned private school options for high school. And I didn't realize that until we added that 8th grade class, that those middle schoolers. And then there was a need for a high school. And high school is a totally different beast when you're doing it on the private school side. And so I've learned a lot of lessons while in motion, live lessons, not read a book. Okay, I get it, but lessons live when it comes down to high school. But we made the commitment to add high school 5 years ago. And then we accepted up to 10th grade that year. So then they became our first graduating class, the class of 2020, 2 months after the pandemic hit, was their graduation. Wow. And so that threw a totally different factor into the conversation, because now it's like, well, we have this first class, we've been waiting for this first class, we've been so anticipatory of it, and what do you mean COVID closed the school, and so that became something that we had the opportunity to grow through and to really tug on our community, to really show that we're here for our students, that no good thing will be left unturned. And they came back and they graduated on Juneteenth. We had our very first graduation on Juneteenth, 2020, and it was ridiculously beautiful. We called on people from the community who had earned their doctorates of the brown hues, and they showed up in full regalia and presented diplomas, high school diplomas, to each one of these young people in the midst of a pandemic. And it was done well. It was done in excellence. And that's something that they will never forget, that this is what support looks like. This is what empowerment looks like. This is what community looks like. And now we have the task, the task and the responsibility to go out and in turn do these things in these universities, do these things in the careers that we chose to pursue, do these things in the military. Like we get to duplicate this feeling that we feel today so that other people can experience it as well. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. That's awesome. And even just the journey of, community, going back to that word, this seems to be a theme, and listening to your parents, to the families of what they are wanting, what they're needing. And one of the things you talked about in the beginning, when you're talking about your teachers, you have reminded me. So I call you guys, I like to call school founders education entrepreneurs, because that's exactly what you are. And even just the empowerment that school choice and just entrepreneurship brings to the education space, where
Yeah.
teachers can be empowered, teachers
Yeah.
can take all of these different approaches and say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure my students succeed, and take that, go the extra mile,
Right.
not be constrained by bureaucracy.
Right.
Sometimes that could really, constrain us. There's
Right.
always systems, but we can for education, just exploring this path is just so beautiful. And I saw the impact it made in my own life.
Yeah.
I went to a private Christian school from 6th to 12th grade, and it made all the difference. I was like, those students, I failed the 3rd grade twice, and teachers gave up on me. And it wasn't until I started going to a different school that everything changed.
Yeah.
I went from believing that I was dumb and stupid and a failure to just like, actually, no, the system just failed me.
Exactly.
It's a different interpretation. And well, so talk to me a little bit about, your students, any, success stories or something that keeps you motivated when you're like, oh, this is hard.
Yeah. I got plenty of those. I have plenty of those. I think the beauty of not only doing private school, but doing private Christian school is that you don't have to force anything. That the burden of Thrive, and this freed me. Okay, because I want to encourage other people that are listening that are thinking of doing the same thing. The burden of Thrive Christian Academy isn't on me; it's on God, right? Because it's God's vision, it's God's plan. So I'm just here to steward and facilitate it, but the reflection is of God. And so then when we talk about success stories, of course there's going to be these testimonies and these remnants of just God doing these really cool things for young people and setting them up to forever be in relationship with him. So not just school, but also I've gotten a diploma and I've gotten a relationship that stretches beyond this diploma. So when we're talking about brag stories, um, oh, there's so many. Where to start? And so one person that I think about often, especially when it pertains to high school, because high school is tough. Our high schoolers and any high school, because people think in their minds like it's a Christian school, so the kids are different, and they're not. Like my teenage high schoolers are just like every teenage high school in the world. They go to the same skating rinks, right? They go to the same places, they go to the same parties, they do the same things. And the only difference about them being here is that there's an accountability and there's advocacy, right? And so my students experience things like other people. My students experience homelessness. My students experience parents going through divorces. They experience matters of sexuality. They experience somebody posting a photo that they sent to someone in private. They experience online bullying. They experience like all those things, right? They experience the pressures of being a high schooler. And then there's Principal Mo turning the corner saying, but do you think that was the best decision? So then there's like this ethical and moral code coming at you on top of you trying to figure out how to be a high schooler. And so there have been several conversations about, do we want to fully commit to having high school? Because it's so much and it takes so much. Do we have the resources? Do we have what we need to really say that we're preparing our high schools for the world? And so God just sprinkles these remnants. Victoria Mills comes here her sophomore year. She's got a discipline record thicker than any Britannica I've ever seen in my mother's house. Okay, arguing with the teacher, fighting with teachers, fighting with students, and usually I don't look at students' records as far as discipline is concerned until they do something, and I'm just like, let me better understand how to approach this student. Let me read up on them real quick. But other than that, I give everyone a chance to present who they are. And so then there's Victoria, who goes from being this super aggressive. Teachers have always told me I can't do it. People are testing me. She asked me to read out loud, knowing I couldn't read it. That's how we got into a fight, because I said, oh, like all of that. And we take that and we love on her and we coach her and we show up every day consistent, right? Like I don't change who I am based on what Victoria did yesterday at Thrive. Well, no, she's a child. She's allowed to be a child. I'm an adult. I'm not going to be offended by a child being a child, but I am going to hold her accountable, and I'm not shifting where I stand. Right? I'm not shifting on my expectation. So she goes from being the student, and then she's in ELA, the class that she was struggling with. She's in English language arts, and she's writing these papers. And they don't have all the grammar, but they have all the content of any novel, the best novel I've ever read in my life. Right? And so it's just like, oh, it's in there. How do we fix the gap of grammar so that even she looks at it and builds the confidence that I can write with the best of them? Right? So then there's just this challenge to constantly put her in essay contests, to constantly say, well, okay, if you don't want to stand up and present, write it out, write your proposal out, right? So we just find this thing that she thinks is a weakness, but it's truly just a gift that she has, and we exploit it at every intersection. In math, write a 10 question word problem essay for your classmates showing that you understand this lesson and show us how to solve the problems. So now writing is like just everywhere. She can't get away from it, but she's good at it. So the whole time she's doing it, she's just building this crazy confidence. And by the time she's a senior, she's upset 2 weeks before graduation because she thinks somebody else is going to be the salutatorian. And she's like, but I worked hard, I raised my GPA, blah, blah, blah. But you yielded and you wrote an essay to get into dual enrollment. And so now we're waiting on your dual enrollment transcript. And then your dual enrollment transcript shows up 4 days before graduation, and the credits that you earned there in English Comp 1 and English Comp 2 push you up, and now you're the second highest person in the class. So now you're writing your salutatorian essay and your speech, and you're sitting up in front of graduation testifying that if I could change from where I was and what I thought about school, and literally saying I had no idea what I was going to do after high school. My only goal for myself was just to get a diploma. But now I'm at Tennessee State, right? Like Tennessee State gave me a scholarship for this essay that I wrote. It's just like to hear her say that, and just to see her beaming and glowing, like any of the 500 guests in there are going to be encouraged. This is like, what can I not do? It's like, let me get up and do more, and that's what happens. Like our students, you convince yourself every day that what you're doing matters. And then even when it feels like it doesn't, like someone says or does something to quantify your 6 months of patience, your 6 months of showing back up, your 6 months of redirecting, and and then you exhale and you say, oh, it worked, right? And then you build the endurance to try it again with the next person that maybe you would have dismissed as confrontational, maybe dismissed as whatever. But kids carry things, man. People say hurtful things and then they show up here, and we have to not only work on the academic gaps, but we have to work on the emotional gaps and the trauma. The school
Thank
trauma.
you. Yeah, that's true. A lot of too many.
Yeah, that has you convinced that you
are experiencing trauma in school. Yeah. And we talk about I love saying, I say it all the time, kids should not experience trauma in school. But the sad reality of it is a lot of our kids are experiencing trauma. A lot of our kids, if they're saying this environment didn't work for me and I got to go someplace else, that's a trauma. That they are changing and doing this based on a trauma experience, or parents are saying, I'm not pleased, I'm not satisfied, teacher or the environment or something happened and I got to go and I'm going to go someplace else. Right. And those things are absolutely unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Right. That's amazing. I'm like, oh, Victoria, heart.
Right. You have to meet her, right? You have to meet her for her to come in. Like Victoria's like 6'2", solid. She's intimidating. So like if she walked into a school classroom and she had a reputation of giving teachers a hard time, it's easier to just let her sit in the back of the room and do what she wants to do. It's not
Yeah.
for her best good though, right? But you don't want to be that teacher on the news either. So you're just like, she don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be bothered.
Yeah.
But well, you're gonna be bothered at Thrive. Hey, how you doing? We're here
Yeah.
to learn. What are you here to do today? You know, and sometimes it just takes to be consistent that
Mhm.
students, you know, people say all the time, and especially in the military, but people say it in general all the time, like people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care, right?
Yeah.
And I think people say that so routine that it kind of gets watered down, but it's a very
It's for
true
real.
statement, right?
Yes.
Like I care that you're here, and because I care that you're here, if we start with our report there, you know, we can build trust. And when
Mhm.
you establish trust with people, you have permission to hold them accountable, but you also have a license to advocate too, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's about balance. I think it's about trust. I think it's about taking time to understanding, you know, in all your gain understanding, gain wisdom. You know, a scripture that people use all the time, but it's very applicable in schools when you're dealing with young people. Like, like try to understand first, and then get them to understand what you're saying using a language that they can understand, right? Because comprehension makes all the difference. You know, it's the difference between, oh, she doesn't like me, she just getting on my nerves, she's being petty, pick on me on day. And that's the difference between, you know, thinking someone's being petty versus thinking like, no, this is what love looks like.
Yeah.
This is what support looks like. And cheering me on doesn't always come with pom poms and a cute outfit. Sometimes it comes with, I'm going to sit in this classroom every day until you read out loud. And so I
Yeah.
got stuff to do. You got stuff to do. You tired of me being your babysitter? Then you might want to, let's figure it out. What do we need to do to get you
And
reading?
that for me, that hits so it hits home. It really does, because that's something that happened to me personally.
Okay.
I failed the third grade because I was not reading on level. And
Yeah.
going to this school, I'm crying, hyperventilating, like, oh, I'm not raising my hand in class to read out loud. The teacher's
Yeah.
like, Denisha, it's your turn. And I'm like, no, I'm
No, I'm
not
not
doing
doing it. Yeah.
it.
So
Didn't
you're
matter
like
how
my
long
Jonah.
it
You're,
took. Didn't
you're
matter
like
how
my
long
Jonah
it
man.
took. Didn't matter how many times I stumbled over words. I was gonna read my section.
Yeah.
And that was something that I wasn't used to. And
Yeah.
before it was, okay, we're just gonna go to someone else. Stumble over two words. Okay, we're gonna go such and such, pick up where she left off.
Right.
And but that persistence and that consistency of what you're talking about, I'm sitting here and I'm grown fi grown and can look back now and say, all of that at the time I thought that was the worst thing ever.
Right.
It showed me that those teachers cared. They
Absolutely.
cared, and they said, no, you're gonna get through it. And it's not a case of, we don't think you can. No, we know you can get through this. We know
No,
you
you
can
can.
read.
Yeah.
We know you can. And
Yeah.
we're just a matter of just pulling that potential out of you. And that process is sometimes not, so cute.
Comfortable.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
it's not
comfortable.
always comfortable. It's not always comfortable. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Like your story is like I say you're like my Jada then. Jada graduated last year, and Jada came to us in seventh grade, and one day, I mean, it was all kinds of things going on with Jada, but one day I just heard this loud commotion. I step into the hallway and I'm just like, what is going on? And she's in the hallway crying hysterically. You know, teacher's like, she's trying to fight me. And I'm like, you better get to talking, and you better get to talking quick in here trying to fight grown folks. And, you know, she's
Mm,
just like, he keeps calling on me. I was like, what's wrong with him calling you? And finally, she's just like, I can't read. You know, it's just like, how do you get to seventh grade and you can't read? I said, you can't read good? No, I can't read at all. I'm like, how are you in seventh grade and you can't read? You know, but these things are happening, and
every day.
and students have all kind of shock, stress, all kinds of stuff, you know. And so then it was just it wasn't easy for her, but we put things in place to help her. Like, hey, all right, cool. So
Yeah.
my kindergarten teacher is the phonetics professor of America, as far as I'm concerned. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask her to stay 3 days a week for an hour, and I'm
Hmm.
going to call your mom and see if you can stay 3 days a week, and you're going to go see her. And you know the humility it takes to be
Yeah.
A seventh, eighth grader going over to the kindergarten classroom for an hour learning your blends, but she did
Mhm.
it. But she did
Yeah.
it. She did it because she wanted something for her, but she also wanted to I don't want to say be pleasing, but she wanted to prove us right.
Yeah.
She wanted to prove us right. That like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, you guys believe in me. I'm gonna prove you right. I'm gonna prove that I can do it. And I think confidence changes everything. Like a lot of things that we see in the world now, confidence is the difference. And if we start building confidence in school where people spend the majority of their time, right?
Yeah.
If we surround people with confidence and empowering activities and this momentum, that momentum carries you. It makes you resilient. It makes you um, the person that you aspire to be plus some,
Right.
plus some. And I think people have to be inspired to be the best version of them. And I think for that to happen, you have to be with people that have vision and that
Mhm.
people that want to see the best version of you. They don't want to just get a check at the end of the month. They want to be able to come to you as their doctor. They want to call you to DJ their parties. They want to be able to invest in you beyond this education. They want to have a lifelong investment um, that profits the world. That benefits not just our community but all communities. And I think it's important. I think what you said is important, that people have to be consistent, and that consistency breeds a confidence that sometimes people believing in your capacity to do something, even when
Mhm.
you've been told that you can't, is what changes the game for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I am like loving your not only your passion, but the actualization of that passion, because a lot of people have the passion. They have, what they want to see happen. They have goals and dreams, but until those actually come to fruition, and then it's like you have that, and then you're making a difference on top of that. Like you have all of these student stories, you can say, oh, that reminds me of this student. Like, oh, look at Victoria. Like, this is that's a real difference. And the starfish story, where it's like, you might not be able to help all of the millions of kids in the country, but those students along the way who lives are being transformed is amazing. And I just, yeah, just thank you, because there are education reformers, people in advocacy like myself, and who talk about the things, the inequalities and the challenges that are in education, and then to talk to school founders and hear the gleams of hope. And there's always constant hope.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, what can listeners, what can students, families, educators do to support your work? I will pull up your website here, beautiful website. You can go and learn more about Thrive. You can visit their website. That's one thing you can do, at thrivechristianacademy.org. And it's a beautiful layout. Love the all. And look at, so for those watching, you can see the kids during worship or assembly. I don't know what do you
It's
call it? You
chapel.
call
You got it
it
right. It was
chapel.
chapel. We got chapel on
Yeah.
Fridays. It was a
Hey,
chapel
we
channel.
Yes,
Yeah.
we had chapel. We called it assembly every Friday and Tuesday.
Yeah.
Had
Okay. 2 times
twice
a
a week.
week.
Hey,
Yeah.
I stayed in church. I kid, because people jokingly say, "Oh, we grew up in church." I said, whatever. Like, I went to my
Right.
church at school. I went to Bible study, choir rehearsal. We had chapel twice a week at school, and then we had church 3 times a week at
We
regular. I'm like, y'all did
exactly.
not grow up in
Listen,
church.
yeah,
Y'all,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you did it. Let me tell you, you did it.
Right. No t-shirt for you. No t-shirt for you, friend. No, you're right. I get it. So I think support in this pandemic looks a lot different, right? And so days of being like, oh, school supplies, we don't have a shortage of school supplies, but access to resources. And earlier you mentioned teachers, and how there's a lot of conversations going on about teacher attrition and retention, right? And so one way that I believe you could support Thrive, but any institution listed on your website as a Black owned school is to find ways to sew into those teachers. That teacher attrition rates will be what take us out of here, right? The idea that either one, I'm worn out and there's a pandemic and there's just so many risks that I'm taking on, and you're not paying me enough to take that risk on. Is a very honest reality happening right now, and that doesn't make them bad people. Teachers want to teach. If someone's teaching in a private school, give them some respect, because number one, they're not getting paid what other people are getting paid. And number two, that means that they're doing it because it's their heart's work, right? I have teachers who have retired from public school that came back to teaching, right? Just because it was calling them every day. And I want to be able to quantify that in a way that makes sense with everything going on in the world right now. What people were able to live off of or make happen before the pandemic is very different now. Resources are different, and what people need in shelter and accommodations and supplies and PPE and having to order stuff online instead of walking into stores, like all those things cost money. It all costs money, and so like anything else, there should be, I believe, it's my goal to raise salaries. And so I started a campaign called the Gideon campaign. And long story short, Gideon is a warrior in the Bible, but he didn't know he was a warrior until he was a warrior. And he just felt really ill-equipped for the battle ahead of him, and he had like 1,000 soldiers. He didn't think that was enough, and then God sent them to drink from a river, a stream, and had Gideon narrow it down even more. So he ended up going into war with 300. So my goal of the Gideon campaign was to recruit 300 sponsors to donate $100 a month for 10 months for the 10-month school year. So $1,000 total, right? And so, and you can read about that on the website. You can click on the Gideon campaign. It'll take you to that page. And so that's how people can help us right now. I'm really, our students are cool. Our students don't lack anything. They have supplies, they have PPE, they have everything they need to be successful. It's really my teachers, right? And thank you for screen sharing that. But for people that can't see that or listen to the podcast, like the average public school salary in the state of Georgia is $57,000, and then the average Georgia private school teacher salary is $31,000. Already is like a $26,000 difference. $26,000 difference. Are you kidding me? Right? That's a lot. That's a huge difference. That changes somebody's whole life. And so if I'm a private school teacher and I get, let me say the nice word to you, I have all the challenges of the Black diaspora and their parents and all the challenges that come with us, but I'm being paid $26,000 less than the teacher that shows up and just goes through the motion. That's already me being humble and showing that this is what I want to do. But then when you look at private school teacher salaries, there's just such a difference there. And so we want to close that gap. I want teachers that want to teach to be able to stay here. And when people leave here, they're not leaving because they don't want to be here anymore. 9 times out of 10, they're leaving because they can't afford to stay. They can't afford to live off of what our private school tuition is. And our tuition is very low compared to some of the larger different demographic schools in the area, right? There's schools that are charging like $36,000 a month, literally. And I was like, $36,000, that's like tuition, like a semester. And I'm just like, geez, that's like paying for college or something, And so that's what I'm pushing right now. My students literally like nothing. They have what they need. They have a uniform closet if they need uniforms. They have transportation if they need transportation. We have food closets if they need food. If there's any lack at home, like basic necessity need, we're providing that for them. What I need is help recruiting teachers, because people want to work at Thrive. And then that last question in the interview, when I say, well, tell me what your minimum salary expectations are. When we get to that part, that's when the conversation takes a different turn, because people want to be paid for their intellectual property and their passion and their quantifiable gifts. And I get that. Yeah. I might not be able to afford to hire you, but there's plenty of teachers that I would love to hire that I know would be great for my school. But I don't have the resources right now to meet their expectations, right? And so I would say that one way we could be supported is to join the Gideon campaign so that we can, and all the proceeds from the Gideon campaign go straight to teacher salaries, or or if that's not your thing, if you're not able to do that, another way that we could be supported in this teacher attrition and retention is, to help with writing grants. There's money out there, but I don't know how to get to it all the time. But I know there's people that write grants for nonprofits all the time that to help them get the resources they need to carry what they need to get to operate. And it's a school, so I need teachers to operate. And so that would be my call to action for anyone listening or watching. That maybe the best way, and not just Thrive, I'll advocate for any school because I think there need to be more schools. I'm waiting for the day that your list is so long that you just have to pay extra to list all the websites on your page, because that's what's necessary. Is very necessary. But people can definitely join the Gideon campaign if you have access to resources or to funding and you're willing to help. So I'm not looking for suggestions. I know people can suggest, like, oh, just apply for this grant. Yeah, I'm only one person. You're running the whole school. So it's a lot. And so I know that things are out there and I try to get to them when I can get to them. But it would be nice if people that have the access, have the resources, are like, I can commit to doing this, you know, and that would be extremely helpful. So whether through
Yeah.
the Gideon campaign or through just sharing your gifts with Thrive to promote, to bring in those resources that we need to maintain our teacher population, but to also be able to recruit the best and the baddest teachers in the nation, is would be my call to action.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, it's always, I struggle when people ask, oh, how can I support you, how can I help? It's like, no, there are some really tangible things that
Yeah,
our listeners can do to support Thrive. One, you mentioned, PPE equipment. Schools are still battling the pandemic, and these are things that weren't foreseeable for budgets and
right.
stuff, so supporting that aspect, and the Gideon campaign. So visit the website thrivechristianacademy.org to learn more about Thrive Christian, but also to support the awesome things that Principal Mo is doing to keep students motivated, engaged, and committed to their own education journey. So thank you so much, Principal Mo, for taking this time to join our Black Minds Matter segment on Black-owned schools. And thank you
Absolutely.
again for just the work that you are doing and the commitment that you have to creating people with character, and all around with virtues and in character. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the invitation. This has been um, one of those moments that I'll testify about later as one of those pick me up moments. So thank you for the work that you're doing and just the encouragement that you're giving just by doing what you're called to do as well.
Thank you.